Scott. I just want to welcome you to Ministry with Coffee today, and I'm so thankful that you joined the show today.
Thank you so much. I feel honored that you've included me in this ministry. It's an amazing ministry, and I'm so thankful to be here.
And so I want you to share that story about Scott and what happened a few years ago.
Well, Scott and I were best friends for 50 years, and we were married for 38 years.
Yes.
And we had a wonderful marriage. Uh,
Yes.
we just did everything together. We prayed together. We went to church together. We raised our two sons in church, and we served the Lord during our entire marriage. After COVID hit, Scott started losing weight and kept losing weight. He lost his taste, he lost his smell, and he kept going to the doctor because he had a fatty liver. And every time he would go to the doctor, I would say, Scott, please tell them that something is not right. You have lost so much weight. And he said, I've told them every time I go, they weigh me. They know that I'm losing weight, and they keep saying that it's related to COVID. And so in October of 2022, we were working in the yard like we always did. And Scott was one of these that woke up in the morning, hit the ground running. He didn't stop until his head hit the pillow. So that particular weekend, every time he would work and, pull up another weed, he'd come and sit down. And I said, Scott, what is wrong? I said, there's something wrong. And he said, my stomach's hurting. And so I said, well, why don't we go in? And he goes, no, I'm going to finish this. That was him. If he started something, he was going to finish it. And so we went in later, and I said, Scott, please let me take you to the ER. I said, something's not right. And he said, no, I feel better. I feel better. That was him, I feel better. And so anyway, that was on Saturday. And on Sunday, it was the same thing, just kept having intense pain. And I said, Scott, there's something wrong. And so I told him, I said, on Monday, I'm calling the doctor. So I called the doctor Monday morning, and they said, well, we can get you in next week. I said, no, you're not hearing me. I said, there is something wrong with my husband, and he needs to be seen. And so I said, have the doctor call me. No, better yet, have the doctor call Scott. And I said, because we need to get something done about this, and we need something done today. So the doctor called Scott right back. And when Scott started telling them all of his symptoms, he said, I need you to get to the ER. That day, I had a couple of appointments. And so I'd already gotten up. When he got up, I had my hair done, I had my clothes on. And he instantly called me after he talked to the doctor. And the doctor said, I need you to get to the ER. And Scott called, and he said, the doctor wants me to get to the ER. And I said, I'm on my way. And so I went and picked him up at work. We got him to the hospital here in Fort Worth, and they just started running more tests and more tests. They said it's his gallbladder. They said it's his appendix. Just one thing after another. And finally, once again, God intervened and got us this ER doctor who was just amazing. And she said, she goes, I'm supposed to get off at 7 tonight. She says, I'm not leaving y'all until I find out what's going on. And so I kept watching the clock. They kept running all these tests. And I kept watching the clock, and it was 7:30. She hadn't been in yet. I went out in the hall and I looked for her. About that time, our our youngest son came in, and his daddy had told me not to have him come up, and I went ahead and just called him. I said, I think I need y'all here today. And so our youngest son came up, and then when the doctor didn't come in, he was fixing to leave, and about that time he got to the end of the hall, and here comes our oldest son. And the doctor, just as he was coming in, and both of our sons were there, the doctor told us that he had stage 4 bile duct cancer that had spread to his spine, his hips, and his neck.
Oh.
And so that was in October. And we instantly got in with an oncologist here in town. And the only way we got in so fast was because God once again provided one of our dear friends who was the office manager for that practice. We got in like the next week, and they said that it was bad, but they were going to try chemo. And so he did one treatment of chemo, and then we went the next week, and the doctor just said his body couldn't take it. He started having all kinds of reactions to it. And so that October, November, and December was a time to have everybody come
And see him.
and say goodbye to him. And as you know, we had that huge Thanksgiving meal for all of his family. And he loved that. He loved his family so much, not just me and our children and our grandchildren, but he loved his extended family, our church family, our friends. He just was such an amazing person. And so he had, stopped working so that we could do all the treatments. And one day, just to tell you how he was, one day I walked in and I said, well, so what are you doing? Because I was still trying to work some from home. And he said, I've had the best day. He said, you know what? I could get used to this. He said, I talked to 3 of my friends on the phone, and he said, and then I placed an Amazon order. And I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. And oh yeah, he just went shopping, and he said, I could get used to this. I said, buddy, don't be getting used to that. I'm not working full time. So in January, or maybe it was the end of December, the doctor, when we went in, it was probably the middle of December, and he said, have y'all contacted hospice? And I said, I just can't.
Yes.
And he says, you need to. You need to. And so my friend who was in charge of the oncologist office, they came over that night, and she gave me a pamphlet, a little story, and she said, you need to read this. And I said, I can't. I just can't. I can't lose him. He was my world. And so anyway, they came back over probably the next weekend, and she said, did you read that? And I said, no, I told you I can't. And the boys were there, and they said, Mom, please go read that. And so I did, and I was still in such denial during that time. I just, even though I knew how sick he was, and I knew we had hospice, and he had told a couple of people that he wanted to just do the hospice in the hospital. And I said, no, we're not. That's not what we're doing. His place is with me at the house in our bedroom.
That's right.
And so I brought him home on hospice to our bedroom. And while we were still in the hospital, the boys went home and met the hospital group. And they rearranged our bedroom. And they had put Scot's bed over on one side because, we had to have all the stuff. And so I did that one night. And so when they came over the next day, I said, boys, this isn't going to work. And they said, what are you talking about, Mom? And I said, I need your daddy beside me when I lay down in bed at night so I can hold his hand. And so right then they went in there and they changed the room so that I could have his bed right beside me. And he passed away January the 7th, which was 3 days before our 38th wedding anniversary.
Even I remember my last conversation with him at the house on Thanksgiving, and he was more concerned about you.
Um,
He knew he was going to be in heaven with Jesus,
yes,
and
he
so
did. And they talk about that, once you get that diagnosis, you get angry. You get angry. But if I can share this little story, it was like we were just totally in shock for a few days. And then he just said, Dot, I'm going to go to the bedroom. And I just need to spend some time with God alone. And I said, okay. And so I went in there probably about an hour later, and he was just there reading his Bible and praying. And after that, he had a peace about him that I can't even explain. He was never afraid. God gave him a peace that day that he went through all of that and never was afraid and never was angry, never was angry at God for taking him away from us.
so good. That's such a good message right there
Yeah,
of how we need to just remember that we sometimes have to get away with God. We just have
yeah,
to go and spend some time with him,
yes,
to hear his
exactly.
voice, and
Yes,
to know what he has for us, and to know that how much he loves us. I think
absolutely.
that when we spend that time alone, he really talks to us, and people just don't realize that God still speaks today.
Yes,
He
yes,
he is a God that of miracles even today. And
absolutely.
and we were praying for a miracle. We were praying that Scott would be healed, and God, healed him. He just didn't heal him the way that we were all hoping
A-
that he would heal
Absolutely.
him, and so, but we trust him, and we
That
trust
that's
God.
right. That's all we can do is trust him.
So you've had challenges, you know that. I know that. So can you share some of the challenges that you had? Because there are women and there are men that have lost a spouse and that will need to hear that they're not alone in these challenges that you faced.
I think because Scott was such a giving, awesome person, such a hard worker, he took care of everything around our house.
Mhm.
Um, and that has been such a challenge for me because, and they make fun of me at work because I say, I never even took the trash out. I mean, that was something he did. I never changed the kitty litter box that stays out in the garage. He did that. He said,
Mm.
"No, you don't need to do that." I never pulled weeds. Scott did that. I mean, so that is such a void, but that's the challenge that I have really struggled with because here I am at my age and I've never experienced this was anxiety. I had panic attacks. I've never had that, but I could be in a room full of people probably about 2 months after he passed. I went to a wedding with 20 close friends and my son and my daughter-in-law and my new baby, grandson. And in the midst of all of these people, I just had to run out. I had to just get out of that room. And that was such a challenge for me because I have never experienced anything like that. I was very involved. I've spoken in front of big congregations at church when we were out in Azle, and I've never had a panic attack like that. So that was really hard for me. And I think probably the hardest thing in my life has been that I lost my joy. I
Yeah.
lost my joy in living. Not that I don't want to live, but I've always been a happy person. In the morning time when I wake up, I'm happy. I'm not one of those that, give me 2 hours before you talk to me. I'm just not that way. I just wake up, I'm going to talk, And so I lost that. I could hardly hold my head up and have a conversation with anybody. Uh, uh, I had to force myself to do things. I had to force myself to um, eat. To eat. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to cook anything. I didn't want to look at the mail. I mean, looking back now, when I open a box and I see an envelope that I haven't opened yet, and I panic, thinking, "Oh my gosh, how did that happen?" Because that's not me. I've always been in banking my entire life. Since I was in my early 20s, I've always taken care of everything. But all of a sudden, I couldn't remember to do those things. I was just so consumed with grief fog. And if you've never heard those words, just know that it is real. It is so overwhelming. I'm still working, and I look back on some things and I'm like, I do not remember. I do not remember processing that. And of course, somebody always is double checking me, but it's so overwhelming. Um, the the clarity that you lose when something so traumatic happens to you. You just are so removed from yourself. And I think, one of my favorite verses is Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and of good courage because God is with me. He's not going to forsake me. And so
Right.
there came a point to where I had to finally say, God, just cried out to him and said, I need your help. I don't know how to mow the grass. Scott always did that. I don't know how to take care of the cars because Scott took care of that. Somebody said one day, what did you do? And I said, I made him happy. I plan things. I'm a great organizer. I can plan anything,
I
in the
did his
morning.
laundry. I cooked his.
I did laundry. He was a great cook. But I have to tell you, there were some times when I didn't even do the laundry. But hey, I could send the Christmas cards out. I could plan the best birthday party. And so in our marriage, we had that balance. You know,
Mm.
he never balanced a checkbook. I did. He never went through all of the process to do the mortgage loan. I did that. I'm the one that did all of the financial portion of it, and that was our balance in our relationship. And so it's like I'm just lost.
But God came in because you went and got some help. So I want you to
I
talk
did.
about
Yes,
talk about
yes.
that,
I
God.
After about 6 months, when I realized that I was just sitting there engulfed in my grief, I went
Mhm.
online and I had seen something about griefshare, and I reached out to them, and it was so amazing how God is, because here I was out of the blue, and I emailed this church griefshare website to ask for more information, and the girl emailed me back and she said, were you married to Scot Anderson? And I said, I was. And she said, did you used to go to Ash Creek out in Azle? And I said, we did. And so, come to find out, we had been friends 30 years ago. We had been part of a women's organization together. And so, because of that, I got involved with the grief share at the Willow Park Baptist Church. And so when I walked in, I didn't have to walk in
Not
totally
knowing
alone.
anyone.
Not
Yeah.
because that's the thing about this losing your spouse. You're alone. I started Grief Share, and Grief Share is designed so that anyone, whether it's a loss of a mother or a dad or a sibling or a best friend or a spouse, can participate. And so they say come at least 3 times before you decide if you're going to or if you're not. So on the third time, we have a big group, and then we break up into small groups that usually are about 7 or 8. And after the third meeting, I had always been in the small groups with people that had lost a best friend or their grandfather or their sister. And not that that grief is not traumatic, because it is, because I've lost 3 sisters and my mother and my daddy at a very young age. And but I got in the car that night when I was leaving that session, and I just started crying out to God. I said, God, you brought me here, but I need someone who's lost a spouse. I need someone who understands this deep hurt that I have in my heart. So the next week, I decided that I was going to go one more time. And I am not making this up. There was 2 men who had lost their spouse, and there was 3 women who had lost their spouse in that group that night. So once again, God went before me and took care of my need. And
That's
so that's what He's done for this last 2.5 years, is take care of my needs. If I will pray to Him, if I will seek His face, and if I will be faithful to Him. So I, started praying about where God wanted me to serve and what did He have for me. And so I joined that church because I thought, if I'm going to come and be a part of their grief share program, I need to faithfully be here. And after the last session, we do 13 weeks. And someone asked me, they said, God has laid it on my heart that you really need to think about being a facilitator. And I said, well, I'll pray about it. Well, then I get a text wanting to know if I would consider it. And so I just finished the 13 weeks of being in training, and I will start in September as a facilitator at the church where I
good
go.
job.
And so God is being faithful to me.
And I just love what he's done. But you know
Yeah.
what? You're not alone. You know, there are women and men that are watching this program today. And so, as we close up, what is a final message that you want to say to them, a word to speak to them, to give them hope?
You know, I just think what I would want them to remember is Isaiah 40:31. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. My strength for these last 2.5 years has come from God. They shall mount up with wings as eagles, and they shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Doing all that I do, I'm weary some days, I'm tired some days, and yet God just keeps pushing me forward, pushing me forward. And I just, I just want everyone to know that this is not a journey that I want anybody to have to go on. My friends from my high school, I tell them, they say, you're so strong. And I say, no, I'm not strong. I'm just trying to get through this, because I know in the end, when God calls me home, that I'm going to see Scott and my
Yes, you are.
parents and my sisters. And I said, and so it's just what I have to do to get through. And one thing I want to tell people is, that are listening, is if you have someone in your life that's lost a spouse, please don't be afraid to share stories with them or to speak their name. Because when we stop doing that, then they've died again in our life. And so I would just encourage people, don't be afraid to just hug on somebody that's lost a spouse. You don't have to say anything. All you have to do is just hug them, let them know they're
Just be,
there. Remember them. on holidays. Remember them on special occasions. Remember them on the anniversary. Every friend that I know that's lost someone close in my phone, I had their anniversary date because as time goes on, people forget. And so it's important to us that those around us remember those important days and reach out and just be there for them.
That's good. That's a good word, and it's a very easy thing to do, right?
It
Just put
is.
it in
It
your
is.
put those reminders in your phone and just
Yes,
remember to go back and love on those people and remind
exactly.
them, hey, I'm thinking about you today. I know today's a
Right.
tough day and I love you. Just say I
That's right.
love you. That's
I
all you
love
have
you.
to say.
That's the whole thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dot, for being on the show today.
I love you.
Hello, friends. I just want to take a moment and thank you for joining us today with Ministry with Coffee. We're so glad that you're here. And I want to ask that if this has moved you or encouraged you, the story that you just listened to today, that you would like our page and that you would share our page with your friends and your family. Together, if we work together, we can share the gospel of Jesus throughout the world at one cup, one story at a time. Thank you again for your support. We are so glad that you have chosen to minister and partner with us. Thank you again.